You're listening to the NFPT podcast, where we help aspiring trainers pass their exams and launch their fitness careers. Today, we're talking about push movement patterns. And instead of a sample question walkthrough, for this one, we're going to address why movement patterns are so important for test day. And then we'll break it all down. So let's start with movement patterns in general, and then we'll get into greater detail. To start, know this: you won't see the word movement patterns as chapter titles or example questions. Instead, this is just a broad category that's incredibly important to not only pass your CPT exam, but also to be a personal trainer. When you know movement patterns, you unlock keys to major testing domains that you'll see on any CPT exam. And these testing domains include human anatomy, which is part of basic and applied sciences. And it also falls under the category of muscle synergies. All that really means is that you need to know the names of the muscles involved in pushing movement patterns and what the specific roles are for each of those muscles. It also shows up in fitness assessments because when you know the movement patterns, it becomes so much easier to recognize overactive and underactive muscles during the movement. Then you've got program design, which you should know is a really big part of your exam. Movement patterns relate to program design in the sense of knowing what exercises to choose to achieve what. And then lastly, we have exercise technique on your exam. So you'll need to know how to spot correct and incorrect form. As we work our way through this episode, we'll unpack joint motions, muscle synergies, movement compensations, and targeted exercises for push motion. And part of the reason why NFPT has such great pass rates on the exam is because of our proprietary learning model, the Core 4 learning model. This is where we hammer 4 personal training topics that span more than one of these testing domains. And these 4 topics are movement patterns, energy systems, biomechanic principles, and muscle fiber types. All right. Let's dive into the joint motions involved in pushing. First, we have 2 joint motions to look at. So, if you're given a question on the exam about a pushing motion, pay attention to whether it's referring to joint motions of the shoulder or the elbow. At the shoulder, you have shoulder flexion and horizontal adduction. So, shoulder flexion is when your arms raise up. And then horizontal adduction can be a little trickier to understand, but it's actually simple. Horizontal just means exactly how it sounds. So your arms will be parallel to the ground. And then the adduction part of it is when you're going closer to the midline of the body. Then we've got the elbow, and the primary joint motion here is just simple elbow extension. Let's take a look now at the muscle synergies and push movement patterns. So first off, we've got our agonist, and the agonist is the prime mover. In a push movement pattern, the agonist is the pectoralis major because it's responsible for horizontal adduction and shoulder flexion. So the pecs are doing the majority of the work. Then let's look at your antagonist. Your antagonist is the muscle or muscles that oppose the prime mover. So they're lengthening out during the motion. And in this instance, the antagonist muscles are the posterior deltoids and the lats. The posterior deltoids perform shoulder extension and horizontal abduction. And then the lats perform shoulder extension and adduction. Then let's take a look at the synergist. So a synergist muscle is the one that helps out the prime mover or the agonist. So it's not doing all of the work, but it's doing a little bit of the work. And in this case, it's the anterior deltoids because they provide shoulder flexion, which is one of the joint motions. And then lastly, at the shoulder joint, we have our rotator cuff muscles, and those are the stabilizers. So stabilizers are helping to prevent unwanted motion, and they're helping to build a strong foundation to move from. Now we've got the elbow, and this one's pretty easy. Our agonist or our prime mover is the triceps brachii because it performs elbow extension. And then we've got the antagonist, which is the biceps brachii, which perform elbow flexion. Now, let's take a look at the different movement compensations that might show up during a pushing motion that you can use to improve exercise technique or if you are performing a movement assessment. One of the first compensations that you'll see is a back arch or an anterior pelvic tilt when their low back is arching. And the potential cause of this is underactive core stabilizer muscles, where they won't be able to engage their core appropriately to keep a neutral spine. They also might have overactive hip flexors, which is forcing them into that anterior pelvic tilt state. Then we might also have some overactive lats because remember, the lats are connecting down into that lower back. So when they're overactive, it's going to cause the lower back to arch a little bit. Another compensation that you might see is shoulder elevation. And this is just when the shoulders shrug up a little bit. So they don't have to go up all the way, but they might go up just a little bit during that pushing motion. And what that means is that we've got some underactive lower traps that need to be strengthened, and we've got some overactive upper traps. And the shoulders are elevating just because the body is trying its hardest to produce the movement that you're asking it to. And then lastly, a compensation that you might see is forward head. So this is when that head kind of cranes forward and it's almost like a little bit of an arch in the back of your neck. And in this instance, some potential causes would be underactive deep cervical flexors or and overactive cervical extensors. All right, let's talk about technique and exercises that you can do, especially when you see some of these movement compensations. First off, you can have your client perform a chin tuck. So, this is if they have that forward head, you just have them pull their chin in as if they're trying to create a double chin, or you can place your hand an inch or two away from the back of their head and then tell them to just pull their head back until they feel the back of their head touching the palm of your hand. You also want to make sure that they have neutral shoulders. So you're not necessarily telling them to press the shoulders down, but you want to make sure that they're just in a relaxed state. And then when they do that chest press or that push up, you want them to go into full protraction at their shoulder blades. So have them fully separate their shoulders to get the full experience of a chest press and also engage their serratus anterior. And you also want to make sure that they've got a nice engaged core. So have them draw their belly button in towards their spine and make sure that that core is fully activated. And then throughout the entire exercise, make sure that they have controlled range of motion. So they shouldn't be going out too wide, too far, shouldn't be doing anything too fast. Now, some example of exercises that you could do. So for push-ups, let's say, you can get creative because it's ideal to make sure that the body is working in different planes of motion with different modalities. So you can do things like a push-up to rotation, which is where you do one push-up and then you go up into a side plank on the hand. You can also do medicine ball push-ups where one hand is on the medicine ball and then you would roll it over to the other side. You can also do walkover push-ups. So this would be when you have a slight elevation and you do one push-up with one of the hands on a bench, and then you step up and over the bench with the hands and do another push-up. You can also do speed push-ups. So when we think about developing power, it's all about rate of force production. So speed push-ups, a lot of times when you're doing these, you're having your client drop down onto their knees to perform them because you want them to be going as quickly as they possibly can. And then, of course, you can do band supported push ups. So, this is a little bit of a regression if a client is struggling between transitioning from push ups on their knees to push ups on their toes. What you can do is you can have an elastic band around their hips that's anchored to a point behind them. That's going to help support some of their weight. Now, with a chest press, some different ways that you can make changes are you can do a single arm chest press with rotation. So, you would be doing this would be with resistance tubing, or it could also be with cable. You would do a single arm chest press and then rotate the trunk at the end. That's putting you in the transverse plane of motion. You could also do alternating arm chest presses, either with dumbbells or cables. So, you would do one arm, so you would chest press forward with the right and then chest press forward with the left. You could also do banded chest press to give some variable external resistance. And then, of course, you could also do suspension trainer chest presses or medicine ball chest throws to work on that power and that explosion that we discussed. All right, so let's bring pushing movement patterns home. First, you need to know it to pass your CPT exam, and it's going to unlock answers on muscle synergies and movement assessments. And as you learn this information, nail the foundational concepts first. Then start practicing those movement impairments. And then lastly, you're going to grow your confidence on test questions and with clients. So remember, movement patterns is part of our Core 4 learning model. And also part of our Core 4 learning model is progressing you through the knowledge where we start with that baseline foundational knowledge, and then we progress you into application where you understand how to apply it in your workouts and your clients' workouts. And then lastly, we build your confidence. And confidence is seen in your ability to answer any question related to pushing movement patterns and be able to nail those questions and also work effectively with clients. All right, so that wraps up our discussion on pushing movement patterns. And just remember, the most successful trainers start here at NFPT because of our differentiator of having the highest first time pass rates. So, if you liked how we explained this today, check us out, enroll in your NFPT CPT. Or if you're already enrolled in a CPT, check out our recorded exam prep series. This wonderfully supplements any other CPT package that you might be enrolled in. And lastly, if you're already enrolled in an NFPT CPT, congratulations, you are in great hands and you will be passing your exam very, very soon. Thanks for joining. Keep moving. And remember, let's make you a trainer. Today's episode is brought to you by Summit Professional Education. Unlock your potential with Summit Professional Education, your trusted partner for expert-led courses, flexible learning, and essential CEUs. Elevate your skills today at summiteducation.com.